Welcome to another high value conversation. Tonight, I have on psychotherapist Dr. Michelle DePaulo, and she's going to be on tonight talking about improving our mental skills and the stigma kind of around therapy, right? We're going to talk about making therapy more approachable, being able to use our mind to overcome issues and problems that we have, and being able to seek help but not feel like, there's any kind of stigma around that. So I want to bring her in now to be able to just breathe life into this conversation and overall understanding when it comes to therapy and mental health. All right, I'm going to invite Dr. Michelle in. I want to say if you have any questions, please save your questions, ask them. Hey, Dr. Michelle.
Hey everyone.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was letting everyone know to ask your questions as we go along, and then we're going to answer them all together at the end.
Perfect.
So I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be great.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. I know I know I'm very excited.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I like to dive right in for people who are attending immediately and people who are taking a look at this video on replay very early. I like to get right into some beneficial information. So what I want to ask you as a psychotherapist right away is, what do you think is the point of therapy?
Such an awesome question. And I think it's something that we take for granted as like, oh, well, everybody knows what therapy's for. But if you really, everybody watching right now, just stop and actually see if you can answer that question for yourself. It's a harder question to answer than you would think. So basically what I'm thinking is when I tell people, hey, what's the point of therapy? For me, it starts with education. Knowing psychology, learning about psychology, understanding how your mind and body work are not taught in school. You might have your run-of-the-mill, maybe health class, but nobody's teaching you early on. I mean, I was fortunate enough, I had a psychology class in high school, and then when I got into college, I, of course, took it up. But nobody's teaching you about how your mind and body work together, and they're certainly not teaching you about emotions. They're not teaching you about thought patterns and all that stuff. So I like to tell people, therapy is all about figuring out how you work, how your mind works, how your body works. That's what therapy's for. Then once you have a foundation, once you have everybody's heard this word, coping skills. Once you have that foundation though, then we can jump into some good stuff about, there's times in life that were really tough, and then discuss them and work them through. Then we can talk about planning for the future. Then we can talk about like what you want to do with your life. But for me, if you really stop and think about it, not enough people talk about what is therapy really for? Like, what am I getting myself into, essentially? So I'm just here to tell people, at least for me, you come through my door, therapy is all about discovering who you are, learning about how your body works and how your mind works. So I don't know if you guys were able to answer that question, but a lot of times I'll ask that question to people like, what do you think is going to happen in here? And I think people like kind of nervously answer by saying like, well, I'm going to cry a lot, right? I'm like, not necessarily, like maybe. But I think people have that image of therapy is like, oh, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to cry, and there's going to be a lot of like talking about my childhood and everything. I go, sometimes, but sometimes not. So I just like to lay it out there and say, you know what, in my office with therapy, number one goal is learning about yourself, learning about your body, learning about how you function, and then we see where it goes from there, see what we can improve. Now, there's the other side of things where if you come into therapy and you have an explicit goal, maybe you do have a lot of insight already, you really know yourself pretty well. But let's say you're struggling with anxiety or phobias for stuff, or maybe some depressive symptoms. We could also go into that, but I just want everyone to know, like when you come in, there's steps, there's like education. You're not just coming in to talk to somebody and then we kind of like cry together and give each other a hug. That's not what therapy is. So I want to clear that up and let people know, like, no, when you come in here, you're going to be learning about yourself and you're going to be taking skills out that door.
I love how you put that, because I think nowadays we're getting into an environment where speaking openly about mental health struggles and talking about what we're dealing with emotionally has become more acceptable, but I still don't think that that's translated far enough into seeking out therapy. We have, oh, okay, it's okay to feel, or it's okay to open up, and then, and it's okay to be consoled. But the education part that you're talking about, the teaching you about how your mind and body works, and then allowing you to use those skills once we've had that conversation. I love how you put that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I was just saying to Mark the other day, I was saying, basically I can go from one client to the next, and because I know them and because I know what they've been through, and everybody's really unique, I will, if one person has anxiety or a difficult time in one area of life, I'm going to give them advice. It's very specific to them. And then the next person, they might get something that sounds like the opposite advice for their anxiety. So I think there's a lot of really great information out there. But I think the more you get to know yourself as a base, if you get all that information online, and people are, it's more accepted now than ever before. It's more widely available information. Love all that. But what I help people do is hone into their stuff specifically. So take all that information that you get out of the world. And then, by the way, as far as like the education and background, it's like, I don't know if you guys are looking into all of your TikTok, therapists or psychologists out there, but like, do you know, like, do they know what they're talking about? I'm not really sure, So I think for me, the other thing is, as a therapist, and again, I'll just speak for myself, when you have that background training and understanding about how, everything works together, you can hopefully start to trust the experience you're getting as opposed to maybe something that you're getting online. Love the exposure. Love that you're seeing these things maybe like never before, but kind of helps to like, know that your provider like knows what they're talking about.
So speaking about your background, and also what you said a little while ago about high school and kind of being exposed to psychology a little bit in high school, I know for a fact a lot of people don't get any kind of mental exposure in high school when it comes to, like maybe some anatomy or science, like you were saying, but processes, like the process of how your mind works and how to think, you don't get that. But you were exposed, you said, early in high school, which kind of piqued your interest, and you do have a good background. How did you get into psychotherapy, and why?
Yeah, I was really lucky. My high school offered psychology classes as early as junior year. And I don't know, what can I say? It piqued my interest. I think that's exactly the way to put it.
Yeah.
I was always interested in the sciences. I'm still to this day not great at math. But I guess I'm a people person also. And so knowing that there was a way to study and do experimentation on these things that are, I guess, not as objective. Things aren't as black and white as blood tests, but there are ways that we can test it nonetheless and study people in a empirically supported or a scientific way. I was like, oh, that would be so cool to know better communication skills. Like, why do certain people tick the way they do? Why do some people have a temper and other people don't? Like, that was so fascinating. So I think back in high school, being exposed to it so young was everything. I think a lot of people, as we're talking, back in high school, it's like, we're not taught about feelings. We're not taught about like why we think what we think. We're not taught about finances. We're not taught about any of those, we're not taught about that stuff. We're not taught those things, but I fortunately was lucky enough to get the psychology early. Then I went to college. My undergrad, my bachelor's degree was in psychology, but then I also had a big dose of biology, and then I minored in philosophy as well.
Oh, nice.
So, man, and philosophy teaches you how to think. I mean, that's what's awesome, is philosophy actually teaches you how to think. And then, you know what, I want everyone to know this. By the time I was done with undergrad, I was burnt out of school. And one of the things that's important for me to let people to know about today is like, look, the way things work out in life and the way you kind of get into your career and the way, your therapist looks as a clinician, like we all have our backstories too. We all have the ways that we came, you know what I mean? Like we have all of our stuff too. So I went from high school, did my bachelor's degree, got a degree in psychology, and then I was like, no more. So then I went to work in the field, and I worked at the largest psychiatric facility in Chicago. I mean, the largest, housed the most people. And this is where folks lived. It wasn't a hospital. They lived there. This was their primary residence. So it was 8 floors. Each floor had about 70 people per floor. And there were supposed to be 3 of us per floor that were considered like, let's see, social workers, counselors, therapists. We were everything to folks. We were understaffed probably 99% of the time. And so you really had the hardest of situations to deal with like real quick. And so that was really a really quick introduction. So from that point, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back to school because this isn't the place for me. So I went back to school, got a master's degree in psychology, started really honing my focus, which after I saw how people, let me back it up, how the system is sort of built, not really for the people, not for the care of the people, but really for whoever the funders are of the system, be it whoever, private or publicly owned places, I thought to myself, care can be better. And I thought, well, what do I like most? Well, I like physiology most. So then I went on to get a PhD in something called health psychology, which is in essence learning the kind of background physiology of the body and how it affects your thinking, your emotions, sickness. I mean, flat out illness. If you are more depressed, you are more likely to catch a virus or a bacteria. They've had people sign up for this stuff in experimentation. They're like, we're going to give you a bacteria and we're going to see how you handle it. And what we've actually studied is if you are experiencing depression or, like I said, anxiety, you will have a harder time clearing that virus or bacteria. So as soon as I found out that, wait a second, we can actually treat people better, we need to start treating people better, and we can learn how their bodies affect their mind and vice versa, I was like, that's the field for me. So ended up getting my PhD in health psychology, and that was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And oh man, I could go on and on, the rest is history, but that was totally my specialty. And so now, like you said, I'm a psychotherapist. I have an outpatient practice here in Dallas, Texas. And I've been doing this about 8 years, but my focus is the medically complex folks, chronically ill folks, you know, maybe new diagnoses, old diagnoses, stuff that people are battling all the time, chronic pain, things like that.
I love it. I love it. It's so rich with experience and how you came to be and how your journey was. Someone even commented in the comment section that COVID kind of brought out a really big awareness of mental health, and I thought that tied in really good to how you were saying that the health and mental, like the physiology, ties in. What do you feel about that?
Yes, people are still kind of, I would say, kind of battling to get back to a norm for themselves. So, you know, really agoraphobia is real, and agoraphobia really, to boil it down, to simplify it, agoraphobia is really the fear of kind of outside places. And so you get really attached to whether it's your home, or sometimes people are okay with their home and like their job, and they'll go to the office, but they're not going to go to the theater anymore. They're not going to go to concerts anymore. So yeah, the pandemic certainly brought it out. One of the other things that I love, and you know, a lot of people are like, whoa, she's talking about death. Like, that's not what you should talk about death and dying. But one thing I also specialize in is like terminal illness, end of life planning. So of course, with the pandemic, people were faced unexpectedly with a lot of death that, again, unexpected being the key word, that people were really confronted with, like, what are my thoughts on death and dying? What do I think about, you know, what end of life should look like? Really challenging. So that was at the like really, really tough end. And then there was the people middle ground as far as anxiety and like kind of going back out and reacclimating, who are doing a lot better now. And then folks who are still struggling to get back into the world and reacclimate to where they were pre-pandemic. But yeah, health psychology and pandemic was like one mash together. And people were saying, like, you know, did the business suffer? And I said, I was busier than ever. I was busier than ever. Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, like you said too, though, the loss of their job or the circumstances, the stress, like even the extra factors besides just the health piece,
yeah,
that were happening to people unexpectedly, putting them in a situation where, you know, mental health just became something that we were able to talk about more, like what we were going through, and people being sad and not being able to go out, losing social contact was, I think, a really good place for us to discover maybe some of the things that we had kind of been holding in. And I think you said something great a second ago where you said, care can be better. When you were in the Chicago, like I like that almost as a motto, you know, as a mantra for you. Care can be better. With that being said, why do you think it is that some people find getting a therapist or getting therapy so unapproachable?
I love this question, and I can I'll call myself out for a second, because I remember at a young age, like the vision or the visibility of what I saw a therapist was. And so the kind of, you know, stereotype, what you saw on TV, what you saw in movies. And I remember being young. I mean, being kid, junior high, even in high school when I was starting to explore psychology and really falling in love with it. Even at that time that I loved psychology, you know, the viewpoint of what a counselor or a therapist was, I was like, I wasn't feeling it. I really was not, I wasn't into it. And I was like, I don't want that. You know, that's not my field. And in fact, we talked about how I got here, but there's chunky parts of my story where this was not where I thought I was going to be. I mean, honestly, based on exactly your question, which is what are some of the barriers, or why don't people actually get to therapy? I'm going to be honest. My first impressions of what a therapist was somebody who was disingenuous, kind of like textbook, kind of stuffy, kind of like not relatable. And so for me, I was like, first of all, I wouldn't go to that. I wouldn't do that. And nor do I want to be that. I don't want to be in that category of people. So I want to say this. I will say this. I am well aware of my stimulus value. Now, stimulus value is a fancy way of saying what people think and feel inside very quickly after seeing me. I'm aware. I am the prototypical looking therapist. I'm a white woman. That's a prototypical looking therapist. I'm aware of that. But I think one of the things that people shy away from is what I have said, which is like, how am I going to sit down in front of a person who maybe, I think they're going to kind of just give me lip service. They're going to tell me stuff that I could read online. They're going to, maybe they're going to judge me. I can't be fully honest with them about anything in life, because I don't know that they're going to give a warm reaction to what I'm going through. So, I think as a point of providing better care, but also I'll be real with you, Mark, like I like to say, ain't nobody got time to be fake. I don't have time or energy to be fake. So I just tell people, I can't do it. So I want people to know this, look, I may be a white woman, but we all come from our own places, and we are as different and diverse as there are as many people and problems that are in the world. So if you are one of those people who shied away from like maybe going to see a clinician, a therapist, whoever you end up seeing, and you're like, no, they're not going to get me, or they're going to be really stuffy and they're going to have a sweater on, and it's going to be like the whole thing. And look, this is what you see, what you hear, this is what you get during session. So I just want people to know better visibility. This is how I talk. This is how I go. And is my vibe and energy going to be everybody's cup of tea? Absolutely not. I curse during session. I invite people to do that. If they need to take their shoes off, or if they need to lay on the ground or walk around, I'm here with that. But I just want people to know all I could do is me, right? All I could do is sit up in front of everybody right now and go, if you see this right now, I have a PhD, I've got 3 master's degrees, I have the education to back it up, but this is it. So just know, don't let that shy you away from like going to see a provider. Now you do have to search, you do have to find somebody, but you can't find somebody that you vibe with. It doesn't have to be disingenuous and like this textbook stuff that you're like, that's not for me. Not true. Not true. There's a variety of us out there.
Definitely. And you do even virtual sessions, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So pandemic was 100%. But look, I'm in my office right now. This is a live office, but so much of what I do is still virtual. And you know what? It's worked out so well with people. So why stop?
Yeah, but I think that it's great because even people who hear you and come to this call, you're giving us a different view of what a therapist can feel like. Like you said, when we were younger, there was the stigma of laying on the couch, the person with the notepad with the little one piece of eyeglass on the little hook, like, like
terrible.
Oh. They used to make jokes, like, you got to go see the shrink. I don't want to see a shrink. I would say that. And then it also used to seem very upper class, right? 100%. Like you watch movies, you watch movies and stuff. It was either at the hospital or you got committed, or it was someone who could afford it, like a luxury, right?
100%.
Now you give off the feel, and I think the culture is starting to become one that where you can have a therapist that feels friendly, right? You have
I hope so.
Yeah. You have someone who's helping you with your life, and a teacher versus like someone you have to go see because you're having a problem or like a complete breakdown. It's like, I can't handle this, or I feel a little bit of overwhelm. Why can't I get assistance and that feel perfectly normal and it feel comfortable?
Yeah. Well, in that kind of, a lot of people were hesitant with telehealth, and I don't blame that at all. I don't think anybody should go into any situation with a therapist, a doctor, anybody, and just be like, yeah, I'm 100% vulnerable in this case. I tell people, like, a lot of my introduction to this is like, look, the world can be dangerous. People can be dangerous. People can be two-faced. People can be shady, right? People can be disingenuous. Like, you keep yourself feeling safe and protected, even with me. And then I, over time, kind of just say, look, I'm not going to push you to talk about anything. Just know I'm available. And we're going to start talking, and things are going to kind of unravel for you how you want them to unfold. And so, understandably so, like, people were nervous about like telehealth, and I go, that's reasonable. And I kind of just, we eased into it like anything else. And I think over time, people started to realize like there can be a real benefit to like being in a safe place in your house. If your house is a safe place. Other people were like, I can sit in my car if it's too loud in my house, and that worked out well for them. So yeah, it's totally, that's the other thing I want to add is don't expect to go into therapy and just be like, oh, I'm just going to like open up and just like, no, that's not how it goes. And if you, by the way, like pro tip, if you go into a therapist's office and they like expect you to talk about trauma right off the bat and all that stuff, run. Like, that is not right. That is not right. So,
Pro tip. I love how you said pro tip.
Pro tip.
Lauren put in the chat, she said you don't have to be completely broken or on edge to speak to a therapist. Yeah, that's exactly good.
Let me say something about that. I cannot tell you. I could not count how many times people will, again, like we start working together to that point and they're like, oh, I thought I had it all together. But the issue is a person could get so used to suppression and kind of what we call disintegration that they're like, I'm totally fine. I'm not tense at all. I have everything really well together. Look at me. I'm so happy. What do you mean? I'm not stressed at all. I'm great. And they're just like, oh, I just don't ever sleep. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So yeah. I can't tell you how many times people have come in going like, there's nothing really going on, which absolutely, but come in regardless. Yeah. Come in regardless. But then they're like, oh, you mean I totally have my anger locked down such that anger is not, I don't get angry. So that's why my life is great and not that much of a problem. I'm like, okay, I respect that. And then again, it's up to them to, go, is that okay? And I go, well, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
I kind of have a flip on the script on that where it's like, yeah, I can tell you how many people come in and they're like, I'm great. And they're like, oh, I haven't cried in 25 years. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it.
Talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that. So let's talk about this. How do you recommend that people kind of start to begin with the struggles of life?
Yeah. That's a big one. So I kind of like, I'll point something out that I just did. To me now it's second nature and it's muscle memory. I don't have to think about it, but I just took that sigh. Mm-hmm. Now I've been trained in, if you guys have ever heard of, or go ahead and look it up, Google, biofeedback, or I'm sure everybody's heard of breathing now and deep breathing training and all that kind of stuff. And there's all kinds of stuff out there. But the long and short of it is, your body has built-in mechanisms already. It already has stuff, and frankly, to a point that's involuntary. And then what will happen is you kind of lose the skill, but you can get it back. So my muscle memory is to the point where if I'm asked a big question, or if I'm like, going a million miles a minute, if I get overwhelmed, my body now from the muscle memory is just like, whew, I just take a big old sigh. I just take a big old sigh. So first things first, when it comes to where do you start? If y'all take one thing away from my quick, pro tips today, it would be slow down. Slow down. And my natural state is pretty fast. So like I said, with people who come in and they're like, yeah, I'm doing great, I'm fabulous, there's nothing, going on. Once you start to slow down, you do start to feel more. Once you start to feel more, you start to recognize what you're thinking a little bit more. Once you start to slow down, you start to be able to better identify what your value system is. You start to realize what's important to you. But forget all that for a second. Slowing down is going to prevent so many more complications and problems just by slowing down. The world moves so fast now. Like I said, you probably already move fast already and probably don't know it. But the world encourages you to move faster. If you just slow down, you are going to prevent so many problems from happening just by virtue of going, it feels like an eternity. It's all of about 4 seconds. I am not, I'm not trying to be funny when I say it doesn't seem right. It seems too easy. I am not trying to be funny when I say that will prevent you from so many problems. So if the question is like, where do I even start? I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be complicated. It's really not going to be, well, look at your symptoms of anxiety or look into like forget all that. Slow down. Slow down so you don't say something out of a reaction, you know, because you're just reacting fast. Slow down to think things through what you're about to like decide to do. Slow things down to think your words through, you know, more clearly. Slow things down when your chest is tight. Slow things down when you're starting to get sweaty or you're like, my mind's going blank if you're working or taking a test. Slow down to get that overwhelm under control. Slow down.
I love how you put that, because one of the very first books in my life that got me even into higher level thinking and enjoying the brain and mental processes and even thinking about my thinking was this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in that book, one of the key skills that he taught was the difference between reaction and then taking time to choose your response. He said, in between stimulus, what happens to us, and what we do, there is a little space. And between stimulus and response is a space in our ability to choose. And sometimes those lines get blurred and we think that everything is reaction. And so I love how you put slow down, because it gives you that space to, like you said, think, gives you a moment to observe. There's so much can happen in that 4 seconds, like you said, before you just react, or if a lot is going on, before you react to everything that's going on, you can slow down.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm going to add something else to this. I'll make it a little bit more complicated because y'all are smart and you can handle it. So whoever's watching this, I'll add a little bit to it. One of the things I studied, one of my passions, is the nervous system. And our whole system is designed based on, of course, our brain and then our spinal cord and then offshoots. You've seen the, you know, nervous system looks like trees and like a bunch of limbs in your body. So here's what happens when you go too fast, like all the time.
Yeah.
You get into something called chronic activation, more specifically, sympathetic nervous system activation. That's your fight or flight mode.
Mm-hmm.
One of the misconceptions is that fight or flight mode is always like, ah, like you're 10 out of 10, you know, like I'm about to kick somebody's butt. You know, everybody thinks like that's what fight or flight mode is. No, it's never all the way on or all the way off. You've got the system that can get you to a 10 out of 10, but you got to know, you know, you're either dominated by your fight or flight mode system or dominated by your relaxation system. But you could be like mildly activated. And again, people lose their ability to even recognize that it's happening because some people will call it stuck. I just say you get so used to being activated, you don't even know what it feels like to be relaxed. So to your point about like fast reaction, sometimes people are like, that's just how I am. I go, I believe you. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's not just like, well, that's who I am. No, that's not true. That may be what you're used to. And you're used to being so activated for so long that if you don't move fast, you're like, well, you know, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You really can. So one of the things on top of just your normal, like stressors, okay, let's say, is people are walking around chronically activated. Why? Oh God, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but cell phone use, all the extra, you know, the dopamine that's so easy to get nowadays. And it's just, how fast can you scroll through something? That's keeping you chronically activated. Like,
No,
that's a whole story.
I have a friend who just said that she had to get off social media so that she could stop using it as a crutch to escape the things that she was going on and just really be with herself and really experience her emotions instead of always trying to, you know, escape or using it as a crutch to act like she wasn't having those emotions.
100%. I challenge people, like, if you think it's not that big of a deal, I challenge you, go 24 hours without your phone. Go 24 hours without your phone. If you have kids, make sure you know your kids can get a hold of you, or it's a weekend or whatever the case is. I'm not saying be irresponsible, but go 24 hours without your phone and you see how you feel, and you tell me that you're not, you haven't become
Not
used to
super
that
activated.
amount of
Yeah.
stimulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because what will happen is you go through withdrawal. I know that sounds crazy, but you do. You will go through withdrawal. You will feel jumpy. You will be irritable. I kid you not, you might have headaches. You definitely are not going to be able to sleep. So when I say you're used to just being chronically overstimulated and you don't even recognize it anymore, that is the truth. You don't even know that's what overstimulation is. So
one trick I use is I don't have any notifications on my phone.
Yeah, me either.
You know what I'm saying?
Me either.
I have where like my text messages or my emails or and not social media, but my text message, emails, phone calls, I'll have the little number that comes up if I missed a call or how many text messages I have that'll let me know there's something there if I want to check it. But I think early on I adopted this attitude that my phone was my tool. It wasn't there to interrupt me. But I got that from 7 Highly Habits of Highly Effective People as well, because he talked about things that are urgent but not important, right? He was like, there are a lot of things that we deal with that are urgent, that seem like crisis. The phone ringing seems very, very important, but depending on who the call is from, it might not be. It could be a spam call, right? But a ringing phone seems so very urgent, So let me ask you this. I know we spoke about overwhelm when you first started talking about the struggles of life. So how do we recognize that overwhelm and kind of maybe start to do something about that overwhelm? I know you talked about slowing down when we're going through like a lot of struggles in life, but how do we kind of even recognize, admit that we're feeling overwhelmed, and what do we do about it?
Oh my God. And that's an awesome question. I'll give, like I said, a taste of a complexity here. How is a person even supposed to recognize what overwhelm is if maybe, for example, you had, your parents or the important people around you always telling you that was normal?
True.
Or like, they were always overwhelmed themselves, or gave the signals, the nonverbal communication of an overwhelmed person. So another bit of really cool information, at least for me, for my nerd brain, is like, we have the ability to recognize nonverbal information at a very young age. And so people think like, well, I'm not yelling or screaming at my kid, like they don't know I'm stressed. They do. They do by your speed. They do by your pace. You could be talking really like, oh, calm and high pitch, but like you pick up on that at a very young age. So the thing is that happens is, the people around you, not just your kids, but everybody around you will pick up that something seems stressed about the situation. But here's the confusing part: being that it's normal, it's that way all the time. We'll talk about your kids again. They learn like, oh, that's the normal way to be. That's just what we call observational learning. That's not even a parent, for example, teaching you like, no, you can't have emotions. That's a waste of time, or that makes you soft, or, overwhelm. I did 10 times that. You won't even know what overwhelm is, so there's observational learning. And then there's overt learning, what people are actually telling you. So it's like, how do you deal with overwhelm? Man, I'm going to start with just saying, at first, if that sounds like you, if that sounds like how you were raised, okay, don't expect to jump into that notion and just go, oh, yes, I believe it. You have to, here's what we do. Allow yourself some space. That sounds weird, but, hear me out on this. Allow your mind some space to just let that roll around. All I ask for people is that you have just a little bit of curiosity about it. Like, is it possible? Is it possible that you at a very young age had no idea what overwhelm was, and it was actually inadvertently or on purpose encouraged, but it wasn't called overwhelm, it was called normal? Let that roll around in your mind. That's pretty complex, but I want people to know that. Let it roll around like, okay, maybe I have been chronically overwhelmed. Why do I have to start there? Because the next bit of information relies on that education, which is, if you let that roll around enough to where you're like, wow, I do kind of feel like I'm really behind all the time, no matter what I do. I kind of feel like I get really big emotions maybe, but then I like stuff them down real fast and I'm like, I'm fine. Maybe I find myself like signing up for stuff I don't have time for, overbooking myself. Maybe I even get the money together to have a vacation, but I'm not relaxed on vacation. So once you can even roll around the idea that maybe overwhelm exists, then you can start rolling around the idea that it's possible to do something about it. So here's what's nice. Depending on the person I talk to, depending on your life, your answers are going to be specific to your life. So not everybody's going to come in like right now. I'm not going to give the same advice to everybody saying, well, if you're overwhelmed, you need to quit your job. That doesn't make it, that is not how this works. So first and foremost, dealing with overwhelm is, aside from slowing down, is you have to be willing to roll around the idea that you are overwhelmed to begin with. Then you have to start thinking about the idea like, oh, I actually can change that. Mark, I know that that's important to you, is being really very specific and cognizant and intentional about behaviors. And then you start choosing what your behaviors will be to reduce the overwhelm.
Sure. You are hitting it out of the park tonight. I see you. I see you. I see you. I agree with you because, accepting the idea of overwhelm is like something I didn't even hit till like this year. And I remembered back to one of the most overwhelmed time of my life and first admitted, man, I think I might have been kind of traumatized during that time.
Yeah.
Because along with the stigma of therapy, right? Even dealing with your emotions openly a while back was not acceptable, right? It was deal with it. It was suck it up. It was, you know what I'm saying?
100%.
Handle your business. So I remember at the same time in my life, I want to say I was probably maybe 20 years old or 19, about to be 20. Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans where I lived. And I went to boot camp, right? So Hurricane Katrina happened in August. I went to boot camp in September. So I'm in San Antonio in the military for the first time, going through like probably they tear you, they strip your personality away, shave your head. You got to become assimilated, right? At the same time, I can't speak to my family and my city where I grew up for 20 years underwater. It's still underwater at the time, and evacuation is occurring. So I can't talk to my family. Everybody's calling on Sundays to talk to their family. I'm the only one for 7 weeks. I didn't even know if my family was going to show up to my graduation because I couldn't communicate with them. But the whole time, I was just being successful. I was dorm chief, lead-in, right? And so in that time frame, I remember not even really feeling like I was struggling. But then I saw some of the choices that I made once I got into the military or later that year. And when I look back now, I'm like, man, I probably wouldn't have done that or done those things in my personal life if I wouldn't have been dealing with Hurricane Katrina and boot camp at the same time and feeling overwhelmed, but not knowing it because I'd always dealt with overwhelm by just being successful and trying to achieve.
Thank you so much for displaying I love actual examples, by the way. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly right. So that's why I say looking like people like, that's the other thing. Maybe this is a offshoot, but pro tip anyway, if you're thinking about therapy, like, look, I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I am not going to convince you I'm not here to convince you, period, of anything. I think a lot of the times people might go and like, well, like, convince me why I should do this. I'm like, not me. I'm open. You're gonna get quality, top-notch stuff, but you need a level of buy-in to going like, okay, I don't know what all this is about. I don't even trust you, but I'm willing. But I'm not just misconception. I'm not going to convince you of anything. Why would I disempower you that way? I want you to be empowered. I want you to come here and just say, I'm willing, but I can't do the work for you. So that's where I start with saying, like, if it sounds a little weird to say, like, let the idea roll around in your head, do that. Don't go into a therapist's office and just think like their job is going to be to convince you that you're overwhelmed. Like, you have to start before you go in to go, all right, I'm putting my hands up and say, I'm willing at least to say, maybe I'm overwhelmed. Maybe I have anxiety. Maybe this is depression. Maybe I have a temper. Maybe I don't have a temper. Maybe I'm the one who sits around and I can't even, I'm angry. One of the things, that I help people with is there are folks out there who can't say they're angry or they're mad. They can say they're frustrated because somehow that's a gentle word. That's a more gentle word than angry. But I don't know if you've ever encountered that in life, but there's people who are like, they can't admit, and a lot of times it's women, they can't say they're mad. That was never allowed. It showed like you were out of control, or that you like were losing your composure, or like it wasn't ladylike. They can't, like, well, I was frustrated. I'm like, okay, there's more to that. But long and short of it is, all I need you to have is the willingness to be curious. That's it. But I'm not gonna pull you. I'm a guide.
So how do we find in this time of information overload and all the stimuli, like how do we, you mentioned earlier finding the right therapist for you. So how do we find somebody who's going to help guide us? Like you said, with guide, how do we find the right person to guide us, help us plan, formulate, like meet our needs? What does that look like?
So this is the catch-22. It's like, if you are having difficulty, whether, doesn't matter, with thinking straight, with making decisions for yourself, with how you're feeling, if you're having a hard time, chances are, you're going to have a hard time making decisions just in general. So the catch-22 about whether it's a therapist or any kind of healthcare is like, I don't have the energy or the space or the time or the motivation to go find somebody, let alone what I'm about to tell you, which is you got to work on it. So how do you go about finding somebody? Just start. I'm going to give you a resource, which is psychologytoday.com. It is the Google of finding a therapist. Psychology Today, all one word.com. It is the Google of finding a therapist. You search by, your region, your price point, if they take insurance or not. There's a lot of therapists who don't take insurance. What your needs are, and then you email a dozen people, because sometimes that's what it's going to take. My advice for people who are, of course, exhausted is, do yourself a favor, sit down. Don't set yourself up for failure. Set yourself up for success. Plan out like an hour to find it, if not more. Okay. To find like a dozen. Email everybody the same email. Hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm looking to start services. What I do personally, and what I advise people to do, is find somebody who offers a free 15-minute consultation. I also put, on my Instagram, Dr. Michelle Psychology, there's video clips of me. I have my YouTube, and put up much video. It's tough. It's a lot of work. But look, right, doing this, you're going to see how I talk. You're going to know kind of off the bat, like, it's going to work out or it's not. A lot of therapists on Psychology Today, they also, like me, have their Instagrams. Check out their social media, their business stuff, their business pages. See what they're like. I would still go ahead and email those 12, because if they don't have any social media, doesn't mean that they're like, you can't. They're not going to be great. They just, you may not have a preview. Like with me, you get a preview, you get plenty of preview. But yeah, find those 12, email them all, see if they do that free 15-minute phone consultation. I don't advise per se, if they don't do that, to just like, oh, well, we sign you up for your first appointment and session 1 is however much money. Like, I'm not trying to spend my money without knowing who I'm talking to. So unless you absolutely have to, then do what you got to do. But yeah, so see if they'll talk to you ahead of time, give you some time, and then email more than less. Find a chunk at once, email everybody, because it can be hard to get into somebody who's quality because their schedule's full, right? So the other thing I like to tell people is, like, you're going to find people, again, who have their own, like, look, whoever you go to a financial planner, you go to a real estate agent, you're going to have people who have their own mentality about things and their own conceptualization about life. If it's not somewhat clear to folks who are listening already, like, I've got a very clear conceptualization about how to help people, about how I kind of direct people. One of the things that I want to bring to everyone's attention is this idea behind, which is related to how you find a therapist, is being a lover and a fighter.
Love it. Let's go.
Here's what I mean by that. Think about your day. Think about where you spend your time. Think about what you're struggling with. Think about the chronic stuff that's been there a long time. Think about it. Okay? Think about where you spend your precious energy. Okay? Think about where your time fighting goes, your precious energy to fight whatever. And you really ask yourself, how much energy, I'm going to throw out an example. How much energy do you spend maybe arguing with your boyfriend or girlfriend? and it goes in circles, and it's been years maybe, and nothing's changing, right? But you'll spend hours just with your precious energy fighting, right? What if you were to take your precious energy, and instead of spending 2 hours fighting with them a week, you were to take that energy and spend it over fighting for yourself? Fighting to find yourself a provider, or forget finding me, finding yourself maybe a way out of the relationship, finding yourself some support, taking that 2 hours instead of fighting. Why are you so? Step back and look at your life and go, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. I can't do this. Just slow down, right? Sound familiar? Slow down. Take stock of your life. You have 2 hours to fight with your mom. It just goes in circles every time. Look, I'm not telling you how to live your life. You got 2 hours fighting there. Maybe you have 2 hours to fight for yourself. So I think when it comes to finding a therapist, one big important thing is like people go, it's time because, oh my God, it takes a lot of effort. I go, start fighting for yourself. Start getting used to that. You're going to fight with something else that is not making sense for your life and dragging you down. Use the energy someplace else to fight for you.
Wow. Being a lover and a fighter. Love yourself enough to fight for you.
Yeah.
I love how you said precious energy. I had to put that in the comments. I had that one. I like that. Your precious energy.
Precious energy. Well, and so same with what you love. Okay, so you think about all the places that you spend your precious energy fighting. Think about all the places that you spend your precious time loving. What do you look like? Oh, love, whatever. You spend 4 hours on Instagram a day. You spend 4 hours on TikTok a day. You looks like you love it, and that's okay. Look, and I'm not on TikTok. I couldn't do that to myself. I mean, Instagram's enough. You know what I mean? It's addictive. It is straight up addictive, you guys. So it's no hate. I tell people, I think people think I'm going to tell them the internet's the devil or terrible. No, the internet's wonderful. I see all kinds of puppy videos and all kinds of stupid stuff that makes me laugh. It's wonderful. That's why we love it. Yeah. That's why we love it. Don't demonize the internet. It's not the internet. We get a lot of great videos on the internet.
Yes.
But how much time do you spend loving TikTok? How much time do you spend like, well, I got to work to buy this thing from my Instagram ads?
Yeah.
That's all the time that you use loving. Well, here's the thing. What if you took that time loving these things that are, I'm just going to say maybe material or the wrong place to love, the wrong things to idolize and to spend time doing that really are not helping? What if you took that time and you started to love areas of life that are for you? Going back to school, getting involved in an education plan, loving yourself. I mean, God forbid you love yourself, So I think the thing too, if you go all the way full circle and bring it back to what I do as a therapist, is like, I think a lot of times people think therapy is like going to turn you like soft, or you're going to turn into this like crying emotional person. Look at me. Look, I'm very emotional. I'm very passionate. I'm very, I feel all the feels. I do cry. I do get upset. I do get down. I do get happy. I get all of the things. But what I am not is like soft. That's not even a real thing. It doesn't even make any sense. But I just want people to know, look, I want to help you. I'm not going to tell you like, oh, you can't be a lover anymore. You can't be a fighter. I'm definitely not going to tell you you can't be a fighter. No, I want you to be a fighter. I just want you to figure out where the fight needs to be and where the love needs to be. But you need a balance of both.
I love how you put like where the fight needs to be. And it goes back to like slowing down and making choices and being able to be empowered, as you said. So speaking of being empowered, when it comes to having therapy, I know there's self-help, and I'm a very big advocate of deliberate self-improvement, of self-construction, building yourself, becoming who you decide to become. But I also feel like that sometimes we can get too into the self part of the self-help and kind of get into our own bubble and our own judgment. How important do you think it is to kind of have a combination of the two, where you have somebody who gives you the outside view and your therapy while you're also educating yourself and trying to self-improve?
Yeah. I think both are important. The self-help curiosity. I think with self-help and a lot that's been kind of people have become aware of more in the last, oh my goodness, 2 years or 3 years, of course, during the pandemic than ever before, is a lot having to do with self-help or about curiosity of like, wow, that person said something that really landed with me. I never thought about it that way. And then being curious to go, tell me more. And like, that's a lot of self-help is just discovery and going, maybe, You don't notice what I'm saying? Maybe, possibly, I don't know, like, interesting. Let me hear more about that. So I think that's the important part about self-help. I think the important part about self-help also is ease of accessing information, which is a double-edged sword, but I come from the philosophy that some information, some help is better than no help, but it's got to be help. It can't be bad information. We're like, oh, well, some help is better than no, that's just somebody on TikTok who is not a therapist or works in psychology at all telling you to, buy their product. Like, that's not real help. But so get yourself a really solid, look, the internet, you can research anything you want. Get yourself a really well vetted book, or maybe you buy into like a day-long like series online that you could do from home. Invest in that if you're going to do self-help, as opposed to, well, I have one Instagram person that I follow like religiously. Do yourself a favor, like if you're going to do self-help, just make it high quality self-help. That's cool. Here's the thing though, and I'm going to lay it out, and I'm going to break a lot of hearts. What can't you do, or what what are you not doing in the midst of self-help? You're not communicating with somebody. You're not experiencing with somebody. And the reason I say break a lot of hearts is because a lot of folks walk around with the notion that I could do it all myself. I'm a self-proclaimed I could do it all myself. Like, I'll be the first to admit, having that mentality. I'm not going to take that away from you. And I need more people who are like, I could do this myself. I can stand up for myself. I like that. I'm not going to take that away. But one thing you can't do with a book or with like an audio record, something like that, is you can't experience with somebody. Now, people are like, yeah, but why? Do I really need to like talk to somebody, cry in front of somebody? I go, I didn't invent science. I did not invent the human body or the brain, but we have, God, just boatloads upon boatloads upon boatloads upon decades of research that shows at the end of the day, we are just fancy animals. We are just fancy, complex, like, pack animals, you guys. So, what it keeps coming back to, and the more I learned about this, the more I practiced even self-awareness, was it comes back to one of the most evolutionary important things of survival, which is togetherness. We didn't survive, thousands of years ago without safety in numbers. Think about it. So I'm here to tell people, like, can you live like single, like by yourself life forever and ever? Sure you can. Sure. Do you really think you're going to be as deeply emotionally like healthy and well as you would be if you learn to develop safe relationships with people? You can't. And like I said, don't shoot the messenger. I didn't make this up. I don't mean to break hearts. Trust me, I'm not going to help you not be an individual. You're going to be an individual. You're still going to be a strong and assertive person, but you're going to be limited. So that's my point about self-help. Yes, high quality. But the thing you're going to get with a provider is modeling and leaning into learning what it's like to have a good relationship with somebody. And that sounds weird. It's like, oh, relationship. Like, yeah, well, it's a relationship. It's a professional one, but you're learning like, oh, not everybody tells me I'm crazy. Not everybody's gaslighting me all the time. Oh, I'm not crazy. Oh, like I can go back to school. Everybody always told me I wasn't smart enough to do school. Yeah. You're going to learn with a practitioner, a good one, how to just be honest again. So unfortunately you can't do that with the books or the seminars. You can do that with a human. You can do that with a human.
I think it's important because I'm a very big proponent of self-help, self-construction, but the beautiful reason why I have you here is to kind of affirm the point that you're making right now, which is we don't have to do it alone and still be building ourselves. It's not a or, it's an and. Yeah. You can be, you know what I mean? You can be building yourself, constructing the person you want to be, removing the things out of your life that you don't want to have, and taking and creating good habits, while also getting an outside view of if that's the area you need to be changing and how you're doing in the area of change, right? Yeah. Almost having a partner, like you said, having a friend, to come and the relationship with your therapist to be able to move in those positive directions. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say I'm friendly, I'm compassionate, but I'm not your friend, which is even better because I'm going to tell you things that your friend is not going to tell you.
right?
And unless you have a friend with 10 years of college experience and, 8 years in the field as a therapist, like, which if you do, you stay by that person. They know a lot. They're going to help you out a lot. But I like to say I'm friendly, compassionate. I'm not your friend, which means I'm going to be able to lay it down in a non-biased way that your friend is not going to be able to.
I think there's something else that's cool that just came to mind as we were talking is I think that sometimes we look at therapy, we have to go and we have to talk about all our problems, right? And when it comes to, like you said, having relationships, but also we basically started as community and people are around us. Sometimes when we're trying to self-help, we're worried about the haters, right? We're worried about people who are going to discourage us. We're worried about speaking about the changes that we want to make because someone's going to say, oh, well, you can't do that. You can't. So we're scared to share. Therapy can even be a place where you go to share your victories with someone as you're improving and working on yourself, right?
100%. 100%. And I get energized by that. I get so curious about what's going on in people's lives. That is the thing in a world that, and I don't want to be general. I think the world is amazing, but I do think you need to seek it out. And I think you need to learn. I can't tell you plenty of people I work with. In fact, probably a majority of people, regardless of what you come to my door for, be it depression, anxiety, or not at all, just maybe stress management or a chronic health issue. I have to teach people how to have fun again. I have to teach people how to be able to feel light, and they, like I said, they don't even realize that they don't. I'm like, no. So, learning to celebrate, learning that it's okay to do that. People have been around a lot of, like I said, death and dying in the last 3 years. And so you get to the point where you're thinking, or even my chronically ill folks, folks who battle chronic pain every day. And it's like, you're saying I can still go to a bar and have fun. And it's like, if that's okay with your doctor, please do. Go live your life. If you can still go to a concert, go, there's the door. Yes, go. So yeah, teaching people to celebrate themselves.
Yeah.
There's so much criticism and critical nature. That's the thing about overwhelm and people being chronically overwhelmed. Limitless opinions on this little box that we're on right here. Limitless. But you are so right. There are a lot of haters. There are people who, oh God, story as old as time, are going to put you down and make themselves feel better about themselves. They are not in a place that they can celebrate you, and they're not going to. They're going to actively put you down. And let me note this. Sometimes those people are your own family. I said it.
Keep it, like you said earlier, you keep it real. Keep it real.
And you don't even know it. You don't realize, the call's coming from inside the house, as they say,
But I think, like you said, it's better for you to be able to find and seek and go to therapy because it's a, like you're saying, it's a new way to approach it in a sense that the old model of going in, sitting on the couch, only reliving childhood trauma, bringing up all these things that are hurting, and it seems like such a somber situation that you have to go do at your lowest point. And we're reinventing that idea into the sense of, I'm a therapist who can communicate with you normally. I'm here to encourage you, guide you, support you, and let's see who you can become and want to be and explore all those things as we get rid of the things that are holding you back. And it's just such a beautiful view of what it could be.
Yeah. And I kind of introduce people to the idea of there's actually, if you've ever heard of, and you'll see on my Instagram that I listed as something that I can help with, which is mental health coaching. I'm sure people have heard of life coaching, financial coaching. So mental health coaching falls under the coaching umbrella. And the idea being, if you're one of these folks who's like, life's pretty good, but maybe there's a goal that I have, or maybe there's some blind spots that I have, but you know what, I think I can do this. I have some goals in mind, but you don't really have any, long-standing depression or long-standing, deep issues to work through. You can sign up for something called mental health coaching, which is work things out. Tell me what you're thinking. Let me hear what's going on in your mind. And I'm going to be able to pick out, the areas of the blind spot areas, the areas that, frankly, to your point, you were talking about celebrating in your strengths. I'm going to be able to pull out strengths, which is so fun, that people are like, no, everyone's that way. And I'm like, no, they're not. You are really skilled in this area. Have you ever thought about this? But so coaching is definitely an avenue that, with telehealth, I've got clients all over the US who, like I said, just being able to find a provider that you relate with. FYI, if you decide to go the coaching route, a mental health coaching route, you know, you might find yourself with a person who doesn't have a PhD or a master's degree and they're not a licensed therapist. But if you happen to find a mental health coach who is your speed, who's got you know, maybe they were in the military for 25 years, for 30 years, or whatever it is, and you were in the military for 20 years. And you're like, well, I would, you know, I found this military or life coach and they have military. I don't have military experience. Maybe you'd feel great working with a military person. And maybe they coach on, like, I don't know, post-discharge life, whatever. That person can be for you. So just so you know, if you see something called mental health coaching, first and foremost, as per usual, look up their credentials, look up their background. If they're just like TikTok coach, like, look into it, okay, look into what they do. But you might find that you bond and you are appropriate to work with like a coach as opposed to a therapist who we just have deeper training. We've got deeper training for severe, highly severe stuff. But you might be appropriate for me in California, even if you don't really have anxiety, you just have something that you want to work on or work through. So
I love how you put the mental health coaching, because that's something that I do for like a lot of people, and I love it. Deliberate self-construction, kind of even being people's second brain. I talk to a lot of people about how they want to say something. Like they have thoughts and ideas on how they want to communicate something, or they have a relationship or a task that they want to complete where they have to talk to somebody, and they'll come to me and say, this is kind of like what I want to say, but I don't know how to talk to this person. And we'll kind of go through, like, you know, the ways to communicate better, or they want to start a goal or establish a goal, and I help them kind of just see. And I want to talk about, I really think that taking away the verbiage of kind of like change and using construction has been very beneficial for me, because people kind of shy away from the idea that something's wrong with me right now, and then I have to get rid of all that to be this. Where my philosophy is, I want you to like who you are, but if there's things you want to do differently and somebody you want to become, then let's construct that person from here.
Just right there with you on that. I am so right there with you on that. It's so funny because I don't really use that word. I don't really use that word because I don't think it's, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think it's about changing who you are. I think it's about revealing who you are, because if for so long, this is all of us now, you know, I'm not criticizing any parenting at all, hardest job on the planet, but you were given a set of instructions, usually. Yeah. This is the way to be right and good. Yeah. But what you'll find is that as you get older, you might be like, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't really know who I am anymore. Yes, so it's like, well, okay, it's not even about changing. Let's just figure out, like, well, what do you think? You know how many people just never been asked what they think about something?
Oh my gosh.
Or how does that make you feel? Or like, what are your thoughts? I'm just going to just go ahead. The floor is yours. I want to hear anything you have to say. People don't have that, you know? So I honestly mean that. It sounds so cheesy, and I'm not a cheese ball at all. But every once in a while I roll my eyes and I go, look, I'm not changing anything. We're just going to build. It's there. We're going to shine a light on it. I'll be cheesy. We're going to reveal it. But I agree with you. I'm not out here to change anybody. I'm just out here to build wherever it is that you want to build.
Like, this is my favorite about, like, when me and you have conversations, and that's why I'm happy that we're here having a high level conversation, because it gets to this part where it's like my brain's just like sparking. Yeah. And we talked the other day about educating yourself about your brain. Even though you're going to therapy and you have a therapist, and that person, like you said, is empowering you and you're talking, you're still, to me, a beautiful journey of realizing that you have a brain, you have a mind. This is pretty much in control of a lot of the things that you have going on. There's feelings, there's heart, there are emotions, but the brain is kind of the steering wheel. And the more knowledge that you have about your brain, it's been endlessly beneficial for me in my life to have brain books, to learn about my mind, hippocampus, thalamus, prefrontal cortex, and really being able to deliberately use executive function and parts of my brain. But that's because I educated myself to a point where I could access those things deliberately. And then once I realized I had the capacity to increase my capacity, that's where I started helping people with self-construction, because we don't really see that as a problem-solving tool. I have a problem, I can become better than my problem. And that's kind of what I try to aim people toward.
I just think one of my favorite thoughts and phrases is, education is the one thing people can't steal from you. People are going to take everything from you, you know, everything they can. Now, you know, I can't think of a better look. Like I said, with overwhelm, we get so used to the status quo of what our situations are, that we just go, this is it. This is it. This is it. Maybe it's not. I'm not going to sit here and, like I said, woo you and go, no, there's rainbows and unicorns. Like, I'm not going to say all that, but maybe it's not it. Maybe it's not it. Maybe there is more out there, but we're so stuck in a state of overwhelm that it's like education. Like I did terrible in high school. It's like, no, like that's all in the background, right? And so then people go, no, real quick, being that key imperative thing. Where it's like, if you slow down just a pinch longer to go, well, I was really bad at math, but I really like kids.
Yeah.
I'm really intuitive. I got some hustle in me. I've got some entrepreneur spirit in me. I like to sell. I got sales experience. It's like, you could open a business. You could open a daycare. There are trainings out there right now about how to open an LLC. As somebody who did not want to open, like I didn't want to do any of that, you know, the information is out there. But to the point about, you know, overwhelm and being stuck in a particular mindset or environment, like it's really hard. I have a lot of compassion. You know, if that's what you're surrounded by all the time, you're not going to spontaneously say, oh yes, I'm going to go back to school or educate myself. So who are you surrounded by? What are you spending your time doing? Where are you spending your time loving? Where are you spending your time fighting?
Sure.
One of the saddest things I hear about education is, well, I can't afford it. And I'm like, come on. Who can afford college? Somebody call me. Who paid for college in cash? Please. I couldn't afford college. I got student loans like everybody else. I got student loans. Okay. Now, if you can do a little bit more research, surround yourself with the right people, spend your time not, you know, fighting with people who are like, don't get student loans, they're bad for you, and go, oh, I can't do that, it's bad for me. Maybe spend your time, if you're going to spend the time there anyway, might as well spend the time over here with somebody who's like, well, wait, whoa, hang on now. Like, let's be smart about student loans, but student loans are not the devil, they're not evil. But I'm here, like, one of the saddest things I hear is, oh, I can't get an education, it's too expensive. I'm like, of course it's too expensive. But what are you spending your time and energy on anyway, and your money on anyway?
For sure. I mean, education is one of the most important things, and whether it's self-education or it's a college education,
100%.
Becoming smarter it's just a very, I think, undervalued skill and ability that we have at our disposal. And that's what I try to promote the most. I tell people all the time, the best things in life are free. And what I mean by that is not you get things for free, is no one can charge you to think, right? Like there's no, like you don't have to pay to think. You don't have to pay really to breathe, right? You want to find some clean air, but it doesn't cost you to be able to breathe. And your energy is free and it comes back. Honestly, these three things really help you in so many ways. And they're, to me, like they're the best things. And love, right, from your family stuff, it doesn't really cost you anything, right? But being able to think, being able to use your energy to do something that you have thought about, and then being able to be alive to do them, those are three really powerful things that they're explained to you that way as your like superpowers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change that you can seek.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about combining that with the idea of all of the barriers that a lot of people have, especially a lot of younger women. And I think to myself, you know, if you do have kids, if you are a single mom, and I think, you know, you have every barrier in the world and you have every reason to be overwhelmed, and you have all those things 100%. And absolutely none of that is easy, but that's not the point anyway. Like nothing's really easy. But think to myself, if we bring it full circle, thinking back to the mentality of like being the individualist or the lone wolf, or like, oh, I could do it myself, I'm going to do it myself. It's like, but if you come to the point where you're like, okay, like I can actually feasibly see myself getting back to school, but like I would need childcare. Well, how good does being a lone wolf come into play then?
Right.
How good does not having enough communication skills come into play then? How good does not knowing how to compromise or being such a hot reactor or being so reactive come into play then? Not well. But if you have that community around you of people who care, and that's the other thing, is like, just because you're surrounded by people who've always been there doesn't mean that's the people who care about you most. But if you're so stuck on like, oh, I'm an individual, so I'm going to do it myself, who's going to watch your kids? Like, who's going to be there to support you? So it may not be the people who are around you right now. It may be people you have to reach out to well, like I said, are gonna, man, be there more than you would think. And that's the hope I want to give everyone is like, even if you have every barrier in place, like 100%, all of that is really, really tough. But there are ways. You just may not have the skills. You may not have the resources now. But yeah, with education and with the stuff that's like in your way, think about who you're surrounded by. What are they saying to you? How are they influencing you? What are you doing internally? What's the self-talk? How do you speak to yourself? So yeah, when it comes to education, like
try new things. Like I know
yeah,
audiobooks. The first time I tried an audiobook, I was hooked. The first time I read a book that wasn't a book that I had to read for school. Like that's what when I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I was like 17 years old, and the information seemed like so self-evident, but it had never been explained to me that way. And that's what that like later on in life, that's what made me become an author, because I wanted to share my understanding of something with people who were dealing with the same thing, but maybe never had it explained to them the way that I had come to understand it, And that's what I loved about brain books was I'm using my brain 24/7. And that's what's beautiful about having a therapist. Like you said, when you do therapy, you're here to educate people and empower us on how our mind and body works so that we can use it as a tool and have skills. When I started reading brain books and learning about my brain, I felt so empowered because I was like, okay, now I have something to work with. These things aren't just happening to me. I see where they come from. I see that I see this as a common human trait. It took some of the stigma away from it too. Oh, more than it's not just me. This happens like as an automatic process in my mind, subconscious, conscious mind. Like it was so liberating. And I think that's what, this call can really do for a lot of people is to bring that love of a higher understanding of our brain and then using that to our advantage. I just get passionate about like brain stuff. I really do.
Can you see us in the same room, y'all, all the time? It would just be like, confine us in 8 hours, or just like asleep from all the me and you nerding out about brain stuff. But it's okay. I take it as a compliment, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
So we talked yesterday. I had a great conversation, and you said something about discipline that I loved, right? When you were saying that discipline is not consequences. Discipline, I don't want to steal it from you. This is not like, can you describe discipline as a tool and not a consequence or something negative?
Yeah. We were talking about education, and obviously it's important to us. So we were talking about education, and I was saying how I think, so in addition to education, and I was lucky. Look, I think even if you're not really into school, or like we're talking about, it doesn't even have to be school. It does not have to be college. Okay, there's a lot of trade programs. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to learn just from networking with people. You can be an entrepreneur and never step foot into a college if you don't want to. So I just preface by saying that. But one of the things aside from education that I had at a young age was I was a gymnast at 4 years old. So I had the privilege of being able to go to gymnastics classes as a little kid. And I was a gymnast for over 18 years. And although I am broken down now more than any person should be at my age, the thing that I gained was discipline.
Yeah.
So discipline is different than punishment. Discipline is different than consequences. They go hand in hand. You hear them like kind of commingled together all the time. But I need to clarify this for people. Discipline is where you do something over and over again, no matter what. Period. That's it. That's what it is. Discipline is my alarm clock is going to wake me up at 9 a.m. every day, no matter what. Now, what comes next is a consequence. So let's say your alarm clock goes off at 7 a.m. every day. Now, okay, you've got a choice. You can hit the snooze. And now you're, let's say you got to be at work by 8, whatever. So now it's 7:10. And it's like, oh, but then you get up, right? Okay, you have, let's say 20 minutes to get ready. Well, the consequence is, maybe you're a little messy looking.
Yeah.
Maybe, you hit that snooze button like 3 times. Now you have like 5 minutes to get ready. You're going to be pretty messy. That's the consequence. That's the outcome. but you get to work. So discipline is, I set my alarm every day and it goes off and it wakes me up at 7 a.m. Discipline is, I go to work every day. The consequences in the middle, whether or not you're going to get to work on time, is really just a function of, what did you do? You know, did you shut your alarm off, or did you get up out of bed at 7? But a consequence so discipline is just something you do over and over again, over and over and over again. That's it. That's what discipline is. That's discipline. A consequence in psychology language in the textbooks, okay, this is going to sound different than probably what you're used to. A consequence is something that's either and I'm going to generalize this, it gets really nitty gritty, but a consequence can be one of two things. It can be a reward, or what we call in the field a punishment. So there's reinforcement, and then there's punishments, and then there's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and negative and positive punishment. Way too complicated. But a consequence is not just something that's like a punishment. I think those words are like used synonymously, like they're the same. They're not. A consequence, think about it, is also a reward. Yeah. It's also a reward. You know, if your behavior is studying for a test and you get a good grade, that's a reward. That's a consequence for the behavior. Yeah. So people don't think about that. But so when people always misconstrue or kind of use consequence and punishment as to say, oh, I'm going to give you a consequence. Like it's a and then let's throw in that word discipline. People will say, oh, I'm going to discipline you. You know, like it's a scary bad thing. And I'm like, can we stop doing that? That's not at all what discipline is.
That's what kind of makes us avoid it, right? So that's why we have such a negative attitude. And that's why I liked what you said yesterday when you said discipline is not the same as consequence. You said discipline is, I'm going to do something no matter what. And I was like, oh yeah, right? Exactly. Like no matter, it's helpful. Mm-hmm. It's my tool. Yep. It's not a consequence. But if we view it as a consequence or as a punishment, then we don't want to do it because it feels restrictive. It feels like chains. But when we view it as a tool, like no matter what I'm going through, my discipline is going to help me get through it. My discipline is my assistant. It's going to, no matter what. You said yesterday, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm standing by it. Oh, I love what you said that.
Yeah. Well, and I think about this, like, I think it's fair to be reasonable. You know, I think a lot of the times people, you know, and it's a defensive protective thing, but they'll go, well, what if I'm sick? And I'm like, look, if you have COVID or whatever, like, come on, like there's a reasonable nature to discipline. There is. Yeah. But, you know, if you don't have COVID, you don't have, you know, highly contagious, you're not, you know, walking around like that, and you have a headache, if you can get through it, discipline is going to get you to keep and go. You're going to go no matter what. Here's the thing. It is human nature to avoid discomfort, period.
Sure. For sure. Well, let's talk about it.
It is not, that doesn't make you a bad person. It certainly doesn't make you lazy. It means your brain works the way it's supposed to. We are built for efficiency. We are built to be energy preservers. So nobody goes into discipline of hard things and is just like, oh, this feels good. No, it's not gonna feel good. It's not gonna feel good. But discipline is like, oh, my nose is running. I got my brush in my hair. I haven't brushed my teeth, but I'm showing up for work. I'm gonna be even 25 minutes late, but I'm gonna call the boss, you know, whatever. But I'm going. And so often here's the slippery slope. Let me give you a alternate universe. So there's folks who are not used to discipline, and that's not okay. Like very compassionate about that because it sucks. Discipline is hard, okay? But it's the best tool. You said it's a tool. It is the best tool.
Yes.
So people come along and go, any reason to push against discipline, any reason. Mm-hmm. Okay, you know, I'm not trying to be unreasonable, but here's what it sounds like. Alternate universe is like, well, I didn't go to work Friday because, you know, I was sick, so I took the day off. And then suddenly it's like, I don't have enough money to pay the rent. And it's like, what did you want me to do? I didn't go to work. I was sick. And it's like, now you're blaming not going, like, what, like, okay, so you got fired, now you can't pay the rent, but like, could you gone to work? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, so any reason to push against like these external factors, that's what we're actually built for that. We're actually built for that. So in this alternative universe, which I feel terrible about, is like people disempowering themselves to go like, well, the system. Now, if you know me, I am not a system person. I'm a social justice person. I hear that. But I'm going to tell you, it's not fair. Straight up, it's not fair. But if you go to work, if you can function, you can get there. You got the brush in your hair. You haven't brushed your teeth. You're not even all that pleasant, but you've been able to pay your bills. Do you know what you're going to feel at the end of the month, at the end of the year, whatever? You're going to feel good about yourself. I'm telling you, you're going to feel good.
I think one of the greatest things I learned about the mind is exactly what you just said a second ago, which was that through brain science, I learned that our minds are naturally self-preserving. Like our brains are designed flight or fight, right? And me trying to discover how to help people really feel happy and how to help people self-construct. Learning that fight or flight is what our brains are designed to do to keep us alive, to help us stay to self-preserving, right? They're designed to protect us, but they also protect us not only from physical harm, but from perceived psychological harm. So if we imagine something that we're going to have to do as negative and going to possibly be painful, that's what keeps us from doing it. We're not experiencing the actual pain of the event yet. We're experiencing the potential pain of the event. Yep. And because our brain is supposed to help us avoid things that potentially could be painful, we are actually being lazy and conserving energy and avoiding that thing, not because something is wrong with us, just because we don't know how to use our mind properly. Because if we were to imagine the thing that we were going to do positively, enjoying it, if we imagined ourselves smiling, like doing the thing that we don't feel like doing, but if we imagined it happily, it would be easier for us to move in that direction because our positive mental imagery would not give us something to avoid. That was like one of the greatest things I discovered about my mind.
Oh yeah, and that's why I think people, like, again, I'll say it over and over, if it's the one thing you take, I've already said it, but I'm gonna say it again, if it's the one thing you take from what I'm about to say, it's that, again, don't shoot the messenger. I did not create the brain and neurology, but your emotions exist. They exist. Okay, it's there. So you have a choice. You can shove them down and pretend like they don't exist, or you can express them and move on. You can express them and move on. And so to your point about being able to actually like construct a scenario or a visual that is like a pleasant one, you know, I'm going to tell you, if you are so used to just pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down, that right there is near impossible for some people. So sometimes we have to work a long time to deconstruct the sound bite in their head that's like, I'm terrible, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, to get to what you're saying. But what I like is, don't forget, it's possible. There's so much in life that, man, I'm never gonna do. I'm never gonna be an astronaut. Like, forget, it's not gonna happen. But what's nice is you can, these things work, like what we're talking about, the ability to like deconstruct that negative self-talk. I'm gonna tell you, people think like, oh, that has nothing to do with emotion. It has everything to do with emotion. It has everything to do with that. If you keep shoving that stuff down and you keep saying, well, it doesn't help to talk about, that's you shoving it down. You saying, oh, it doesn't bother me anymore, let's move on. And like it's like, you keep trying to convince yourself of that. What that's going to do is block and create a barrier between that narrative and the narrative that you're saying is helpful. So you do have a choice in the matter, and you just got to surround yourself. Oh, just gotta, like, it's so easy. I don't mean it to be flippant. I don't mean, it's not. It's difficult. But just the fact that it's possible, everyone, it is possible to surround yourself with people who actually really do like love you and care about you and want to help you. It's possible.
I think conversations like this are so great too. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I don't think people get to have this conversation with other people enough, you know, and us being able to have this conversation and people being able to attend and watch the replay is able to let them kind of maybe say, man, I feel like that, but I really don't get to talk about it. You know what I mean? And I think reality is a very good helper too. You know, I see people feel helpless, and it makes me sad because you might not be able to do or deal with the thing you're dealing with, but your ability to increase your ability is always there, but it's not something that we're really taught. Like, that's one of my two big passions is financial security and deliberate self-improvement, because I feel like they help move a person towards being financially secure, which is safety, mental safety, and also being able to have well-being or being happy with who you are, right? I think doing those two things kind of help us reach what are kind of like our best self. And that's why I'm so passionate about those two things, you know, because I feel like the more people I can help understand the complexity of money, and the more people I can help understand the complexity of the brain, because I feel like I've come to a good understanding to where I can explain them to others. It really makes me happy. It fulfills me. It's you know, it's purposeful for me.
Yeah, same. You can do it, people. I mean it. I'm not just saying that. You can do
Well,
it.
I thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking your time. Like, do you have any like final thoughts you want to leave us with? I think we even have a question. Let me go back up here.
Yeah, yeah.
We have a question. Can you tell the difference between actions being a part of your personality versus suppressed emotions? Slow down.
Yeah. See that? It's built in. I go fast, but I go slow too.
It's impressive.
Read it to me one more time.
Yes, ma'am. How can you tell the difference between actions being a part of your personality versus immune from suppressed emotions?
So my first thought is my curiosity about this person in the question. That's my natural tendency towards wanting to hear people's stories. We're all just a bunch of stories, and that's what I want to know is like about the person and where that's coming from. So, let's separate this out. So personality, we kind of say that personality is like a set of characteristics that is consistent over time. That's how personality is defined. So we believe that your personality is kind of like, and it's different depending on your biological sex. So if you know, males tend to develop their personality into their mid-20s, where we believe that females develop their personality into about maybe 21, 22, a little bit sooner. But we believe like a personality is a consistent set of characteristics, like something that's really consistent, really predictable. So the thing with behavior is that it's the stuff like the world can see, it's outside, whereas like characteristics would be like the way that you would describe somebody, like they are loyal, or they maybe they're manipulators. So I'm gonna guess that's the intermingling of how do you know if it's their personality or like the behavior is part of their personality. Is I think it's like, well, this person is loyal, so is that a behavior? Is that part of their personality? Versus, and then help me one more time with the second part of the question.
Yeah, is it, or does it come from suppressed emotion? So if you see somebody do something, when they do it, how do you tell if they're doing it because that's who they are, or they're doing it because of what?
Because they're upset. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you this: if now you kind of see the understanding of what personality technically means, meaning it's consistent over time, that's the answer to your question. Is this something that you've seen over and over and over and over and over and over again for a long time? Then that's likely that's a character they have. They're a really loyal person, or woo, they are manipulative, or whatever. For other people who maybe, you know, so emotional suppression is tough, because how do you know? Like, can you just look at a person who's maybe not that like gregarious like we are and go, oh, like they're suppressing emotion? Maybe, possibly, if you've known them for a long time.
Figure out like inside of herself, because we even have another person who just commented just now, and it says for them, in differentiating between the two, it came down to recognizing their values and observing their own behaviors, and that were incongruent with them, you know?
Yeah. It's such a good question. It's so hard to answer, because I think at the end of the day, it's like, how can you tell? How can you tell?
With
like,
a therapist.
With some help. Well, maybe
right?
not. Because a lot of the times we'll come in like with clients with these questions about like how to handle a family. Like, well, how do I know? Like, that's just who they are, and they're never going to, you know, change, or they're always going to be that way, or like, oh, they're just having a bad day, and like, let it slide. And I'm like, sometimes that doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is, what about you? Like, how do you want to handle it? What do you want? Do you want to let it slide? Is that okay? It might be. It totally might be.
That's important.
So it's tough. Like, if you were asking about yourself, like, how do I know if I'm really a loyal person, or if I'm actually just suppressing maybe a trauma that leads me to like want to be a people pleaser? I could figure that out by talking to you, sure, absolutely. But you figuring out another person, it definitely comes down to like how long you've known them, how consistent that type of behavior has been, versus like, has there been a change in situation? Maybe somebody, so again, going to kind of like end of life situations, like have they lost somebody? Are they in a grief process? Are they depressed? Did something traumatizing happen to them, but they're not like talking about it? So they kind of seem different. But how can you tell that somebody's just like chronically suppressed? It can be tough because like the question is like, is that just who they are, their personality type? They're more kind of like subdued. They're not like me where it's just like all the way up all the time. Yeah, I think time. Yeah. I think time, or they tell you, you know, like, hey, I'm not good with emotions.
And I think, you know, looking at it as changing it from looking at like if we're trying to see something negative or not, just being, if it's somebody that you care about, right? So say we're trying to figure out if what someone's doing is coming from their personality or suppressed emotions, say it's like your child or your spouse or your being able to be that person to ask and care, right? Like we're talking about therapy, we're talking about our circles, but we're in other people's circles, right? So let's like try to be someone who's good in someone else's circle. Let's try and be listeners. Let's try and like ask the question to find out if it is something that's coming from their personality since you've known them for a while, or something that suppressed emotion. Not so much we're trying to like keep a devious coworker, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're trying to understand the relative, like, you know, it has both sides, you know?
And that's kind of why I step back and I go, you know, you might not ever know. You might not ever get that information. And, you know, just like I've said about people coming in here, like I'm saying to people tonight, if you're listening, is you don't owe anyone anything. You know what I mean? You don't owe. So, you know, we may not ever know. So I allow space for you to be self-protected. You know, if they're self-protected too, we can be, like you said, kind of models of like, hey, do you want to talk? What's up? Like, come on, I was like, what's going on? You know, we could do that. But if they're like, no, I'm fine, then we may never know.
Right. If anybody has any more questions, we're answering some questions right now. Good Q&A time. If you want to ask anything, if you
ask away,
have a therapy question, or, you know, just something that you want to know or understand. Do you have any like kind of closing remarks, kind of recap you want to give before we hop on, just in case we don't have any more questions? Because we did have a couple already.
Yeah, well, let's see. I was just kind of going through the comments here. What do I want to say?
Well, I know you said some things that really stuck with me. Slowing down, precious energy. I'm on energy. You know what I'm saying?
Precious energy.
I loved.
I'll talk more about that briefly. I'll say this, like, that's like, again, and this goes right in line, Mark, with your book, which is all about being intentional. And it's like, we are on autopilot so often. And again, don't beat yourself up over that. We're designed to be on autopilot. But if you slow down and you really, if you're a writer, write it, make a list, put it on a piece of paper. If you're not really that way, that's okay. You can think about it, talk to somebody about it, take stock of where your precious energy goes. There's no more valuable commodity than your time. We just end up accidentally giving it away because we're just used to that situation. It's just status quo. But if you slow down and go, what do I do with my time? If you spend 4 hours on TikTok, look, that's fine. TikTok is fun. Like I said, the internet is not the devil, okay? It's not. Let's not value judge the internet. It gives us puppies and kitties and makeup tips. But if you spend 4 hours on TikTok and then you're like, I don't have time to go to therapy.
Yo, speaking of precious energy, I just had a thought that I wanted to talk to you about, and it's like, it just got served up to me so nicely just now. I wanted to talk to you about the difference between thinking and having thoughts. Because when it comes to your precious energy, a lot of the times the thoughts that we're having repetitively just popping up in our mind all day long that are consuming us and, like, you know, draining us. And so that's completely different than being able to stop and like deliberately think, slow down. I was reading this book, listening to this book. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. One of my favorite books. Thinking Fast and Slow. And it talks about how the brain has system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is very fast, very reactive, very spontaneous, but it's not very logical, right? Yep. And then system 2 is our slow, deliberate thinking brain, but it's lazy, right? So a lot of times we'll get a situation and system 1 will just be like, look, let me just quickly check it with system 2. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Let it go. But we have these two different types of thinking. If someone to say, what's 2 plus 2? You don't have to think. 4 comes right to mind. But if I ask you what's 12 times, 2,467, it's a multiplication problem. You could do it with a piece of paper. You could stop it. You could take it and do it. You could even maybe estimate it. But do you feel like it? Right? So that's the difference between thinking and having thoughts. And when it comes to our precious energy, I think sometimes if we can just stop and be like, slow down, right? And think and have deliberate thoughts versus just letting all the thinking happen, and even recognizing that that's a thing. There's a difference between thinking and having thoughts. That's something I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah, thinking and having thoughts. Yeah, the difference between like there's flow states. There's just like kind of, you're kind of batting around ideas states. There's just like thinking about nothing. There's, I just think at the end of the day, you have more of a choice than you've been led to believe. You can do something about your life. There is no right or wrong way. I'm person-centered. The other difference between therapy now, just FYI, I want to clarify for other people versus like what you've like seen back in the day, is that, and we all got to start from somewhere. So I can't hate on like, the history, but, it used to be just medical model. Like your brain is damaged, to your point about like, sometimes people don't want to go to therapy because it's like, there's something wrong with you. It's like, I don't come from that model at all. I don't come from this model that like, I'm not saying neurotransmitters aren't real. They're very real and affecting, how you're feeling and thinking as far as depression or anxiety. That's very real. But this is no longer like, well, you're damaged or you're broken or there's something wrong with you. I'm person-centered, which means, no, it's all in there. I'm just going to help you. Like, come on, like, we can do this. We can do this. So with thoughts, like you're saying, it's like, if we just slow down enough to go, not only slow down to figure out what you're even thinking about, but slow down long enough to go, where's all my time going? Where am I giving away my time? And what is it like to actually just like let somebody hear what I'm thinking? Because so much of the stuff that gets stuck and like rolling around, wasting precious energy, is stuff that can be figured out. It really can be figured out. A lot of the times it doesn't feel like it, but then your energy gets wasted and you're like, oh, I don't have time for therapy. Like I'm going to go on TikTok because it's easier. It takes less thinking.
And we're trying to avoid like that judgment too, right?
Judgment, pain. Therapy is uncomfortable. I just want to tell everybody, it's uncomfortable.
Well, I think it's been made to be uncomfortable by like kind of childhood, right? Like being laughed at in class or raising your hand or, those kind of things that are mentally, quote unquote, like painful. You avoid those situations. I've heard people like, to the point earlier that we were making about how you avoid mental pain versus physical pain. Like people feel like I'm a public speaker, and to me, and I've always been a leader, it's so enjoyable for me to help other people understand things and see them be educated and kind of just work with people to achieve their goals, right? But I don't have the fear that everyone else has or most people have of public speaking, which is the number one fear. It's the number one fear, but before death. Right, no one has ever died by public speaking. This, cause of death is never public speaking, but it's more fear only because of the judgment and the fear of looking stupid, or that old pattern of Disney movies where someone gets bullied or laughed at in class. So you have that ingrained. So it's even maybe sometimes harder to even seek therapy or to talk about your feelings or what you're going through with other people, because you're scared of imaginary judgment. You know what I mean?
Well, it's imaginary, and I just want to honor the fact that it's also real.
Yeah.
It's also real. People will judge you. I'm going to flat out tell you, people are going to judge you. But that's the thing about, my philosophy about be a lover and a fighter is you're going to have, in theory, hopefully, energy stores or a little bit of spare to know, I'm going to pause and go, is this where I'm going to fight? The people who are judging me and mocking me or making fun or like don't know or bullying me or whatever. Am I really going to fight here? We'll talk about it, but maybe not. You're going to go, no, and move on. So that's the thing is sometimes just so you know, sometimes it's going to be yes. Sometimes it's going to be, I've had enough. Uncle Bob, of you putting me down. I'm done. Yeah. And so I also teach people, like, I am not kidding. Like a lot of people, again, think they're going to come in and I'm going to be like, hug it out. Hug it out. No, sometimes I'm going to say it's time to put your foot down and say, Uncle Bob, respectfully, don't talk to me like that. Sometimes these are the fights you're going to pick, but I want your fight energy to be there, meaningfully and thoughtfully, as opposed to, well, I'm going to fight my coworker about this shift, and oh, they get me so mad, you know, that's a waste, you know, but save that. And maybe this is the time, maybe this is the day that you tell Uncle Bob, no, not anymore. No.
My energy.
So
Yeah.
But you need to know where to spend that energy, where to fight.
And that's what you said. The best part about being able to learn your body, your mind, and how to do these things deliberately, having a greater sense of control of self, and that can be worked through with someone who's a therapist that's right for you. And I think that's like I just think that's the most beautiful, like, enlightening part of this whole conversation, is that I think through you, we talked about a goal yesterday of letting people see what therapy can be like. Right. And I think by experiencing someone like you today, they've seen that it's not how we used to grow up and really learn that it was, where it was so rigid and something was wrong and you were being, you know, analyzed, versus assisted, taught, understood, and someone even kind of cooperating with
respected.
You. Oh, respected. Yeah. Yeah.
Respected. We are equals here, and we are partners in this. We are like this. That's it. Just so you know, in my office, that's how it goes. So,
you know, I have a phrase that I use that I try to use to empower myself. And I think listening to you talk about when you first said educating you about your brain, I have a phrase that says, "Don't be controlled by an organ you control."
100%. Yes. Yes. I tell people this, and maybe this is where we'll end, and I'm gonna get my beauty sleep, but I tell people, you're in charge. Did you forget that you're in charge? You run your thoughts. Your thoughts don't run you. I know it feels that way because they're, say it with me, too fast. So slow down. Slow down. But you are in charge, people. You are in charge of your thoughts, not the other way around, not the external world. They can be. I mean, we certainly live like that, but you are in charge. You are in charge. Who's in charge here? You are.
Who's in charge here? You are. Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for being here. Dr. Michelle, just a wonderful experience. I know this is going to get replayed and rewatched. And I mean, and we had a great attendance tonight. Thank you all for being on and staying on.
Yes.
We won't 2 hours, but it doesn't feel like it, right? So thank you, everybody. Let's all get our beauty rest.
Thank you, guys.
But
thank you, guys.
We're going to do it in such a more enjoyable mental state tonight, huh?
For sure. And you guys, you know, hit Mark up about what you want to hear about, because I'm all about, you know, talking it through, and whatever it is that you guys want to know, I'm happy to do another live with everybody, because I'm an open book, whatever you want to know.
And like you said, you do telehealth. So if you really enjoy this experience, you want to reach out for an example or like a sample, or, you know, even more of the same of tonight, please use your Instagram. It's on the flyer. Dr. Michelle, Psychology, right?
Michelle Psychology, yeah,
please,
it's Instagram.
Please reach out, because you can have more than one therapist, right? And you can, like, you know, it's not just single file, you know? And I know ever since I've been talking to you, it's just been so refreshing. I thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah.
Like, even our first conversation was like, man, like, we really clicked.
This is gonna work out. Yes, yes. And yeah, you guys, Dr. Michelle Psychology, my company is Stress and Relaxation Services of America. But yeah, check out my Instagram, or check out my website, and you'll find out a little bit more about me if you haven't already figured it out. This is what you see is what you get. So this is what happens during sessions. So Mark, I appreciate your time.
Thank you for being on. All right, everybody, y'all have a
good night. All right, bye.